question is for the Catholic Society. In Jason's talk, he spoke about suffering and how one of the valuable teachings of the Catholic Church is that it gives dignity and hence value to suffering. My question is how you reconcile it with the mutually exclusive attempt of reducing suffering if suffering itself has value. So in how can you say that suffering has value and dually attempt to reduce suffering for people?
Because we have a duty to love others and to wish those people to be happy. However, simply seeking to suffer for the sake of suffering is not the sort of thing I'm talking about. But when suffering is unavoidable, we can accept that as being something which is laid upon us from the hand of God, as Christ's cross was laid upon him. Christ prayed, if this cup can be taken from me, please take it from me. But if it's not possible, then let your will be done. And in the same way, we can desire to alleviate suffering. But when it is not possible to alleviate it, I think we can recognise that as saying, this is something which is being laid upon us for the will of God at the cross. And we can then bear it in union with him.
So what you're saying is that at some point during someone's suffering, it's morally correct to decide that the suffering is okay?
No, because so long as there's something you can do to alleviate it, or something you can do that might be successful to alleviate it, then you can't. And it's worth pointing out that the fact that the suffering is of value to that person doesn't make it okay that someone's continuing to inflict it on them. Christ's sufferings were for his glory and for the salvation of the world. That doesn't change the fact that the people inflicting those sufferings on him were a pack of sadistic bullies. So I think David wants to add something.
Yeah, I mean, surely even you would think that sacrificial suffering has some value. If you, okay, well, I'm sorry.
Why do animals suffer then? Okay, you said value for us, but why do animals suffer?
I'm sorry, but there are people who have lined up and waited to ask a question. If you'd like to ask a question, please line up.
This is a question for the Catholic debaters. I've only done first year philosophy, so you're doing your masters, so PhDs honours. Well, I'd be very interested to know how you reconcile the urethral dilemma.
Very easy. We don't encounter the urethral dilemma because the urethral dilemma. Thank you. The urethral dilemma only arises on divine command theory because the dilemma is if God commands something that's good, then how do you know the commands themselves are good? Is God commanding what's good because it's good, or is God commanding the good because he makes it good? And so there's a big dilemma there. However, I've very clearly pointed out that in Catholic teaching, morality is derived from the natural purposes of the natural purposes existing in the world. It's a naturalistic.
What is the dilemma? What is it?
You just described it.
Yeah, but what's the other side?
Just said. So the dilemma is they say that there are objective moral truths that exist. For me, I would wonder how you can then say that God is omnipotent if he is not able to determine himself what is morally right. That's basically all I'm saying.
Okay, thank you. God is not God is omnipotent, meaning that he can do all things. But for a thing to be truly a thing, it has to be logically possible. God cannot perform what would be logically contradictory, and that's not a violation of his omnipotence because, as I say, a thing, the omnipotence is he can do all things. As a logical contradiction in a thing. Therefore, God could not command something which is contrary to his own fundamental nature or his fundamental righteousness. God could not create a human being with the purpose of making that creature unhappy, for example, because that would contradict his own righteousness, and therefore,
If I can just quickly add a comment, he could, however, if we're talking about suffering, have created a world that didn't necessitate volcanoes, tsunamis, and earthquakes. That, for instance, in one day, Boxing Day, so in 2002, wiped out 250,000 East Asian peasants in one day. Well, I mean, if you're talking about inflicting suffering and kind of externalizing this blame on people, inflicting the suffering, there is no inflictor but God for natural suffering, if he is truly omnipotent, because he wasn't working the best with what he had, he designed the natural order and all of the necessary progresses and protocols that are in text.
Well, if you did actually believe that he was omniscient and also omnibenevolent, then you'd know that God would have his purpose for putting that suffering there.
Yeah, I find that a horrible thing to say. and an easy thing to say for a middle class, presumably, Westerner.
Racist.
My apologies, you have no trace in that accent, but an easy thing to say for someone living in the Western versus not so easy for the peasants.
Well, I think it's pretty easy for me to say I'm not God.
Fair.
In the interest of not keeping everyone too long, whoever's lined up now, these will be the final questions.
My question is to Jason. Couldn't make it tonight, but I'm sure Stephen Hawking would appreciate it if you could clear up exactly what year John Paul II died, because he wrote about that run-in in his 1988 book, which I believe was published well before the Pope's death.
Okay, if that's correct, I must stand corrected. I was under the... Okay, if you're right, I stand corrected.
Are there no more questions? Okay, well, we will now go on with each party's closing statements. We'd like to start with the affirmative. David Chua, please.
Well, I gave my 3 basic contention case, and I couldn't hear any rebuttals to it, so I'll just recover my case in any case. So my first contention was that objective moral facts exist. I'm glad that nobody challenged that, because I abhor subjectivism and relativism and any other form of postmodern crap. My second contention was that if atheism is true, there's no basis for believing in objective moral facts. The closest thing I heard to a case for atheistic morality was utilitarianism. That is, start with the principle that you want to maximize the greatest good for the greatest number, and there you've got some kind of basic structure for morality. That's okay if you can actually find an objective basis for that teaching. And so I await my opponent's closing speeches, and I'm sure they'll be able to give me that objective basis for that teaching. Otherwise, why value that principle over other principles? And what is this greatest good anyway? Because I'm pretty sure that a lot of people value very different things, and some people value things I would consider completely abhorrent. There's a good quote here. Okay. Yeah, I'm going to chuck out this quote. It's from Nietzsche. This is what he says. Morality is a hindrance to the development of new and better customs. It represents the experiences of men of earlier times. It makes you stupid. I submit that if you do have desires or opinions that do go against your time, and if there are no objective moral standards, then why would you want to suppress your own innate desires? Surely they should triumph over the herd morality. I think it would be cruel to suppress your inner feelings and thoughts about what's true if there's no one to stop you, if there's no objective fact that's stopping you from doing that. My third contention was that if Catholicism is true, there's no basis for believing in objective moral facts. So I gave what I think is a fairly clear case for Catholic teaching, which is it's called natural law. So the universe has a purpose, human beings have purposes. Our good is to fulfill that purpose. Right and wrong consists in actions which act for or against that purpose. Somebody asked about animal suffering, and so I think that's a important thing, and I think Catholics have a duty to minimise animal suffering wherever possible, because it is against the flourishing of an animal to suffer. However, you know, in this picture of the universe that Catholics espouse, human beings are rational creatures, and you value something according to its worth. And so I don't think there's anything fundamentally wrong about valuing a human person more than, say, a rat or a mouse. I think there's clear objective grounds in nature for this principle. Travis and Patrick have made passionate cases for the value of justice, equality, care for others. I agree with them on a subjective level, right? I subjectively think that they're good, and I'm sure they subjectively think that it's good as well. However, in some cultures, people also agree to the value of slavery. What's the difference? I submit that the difference is that some of these are subjective judgments, however, some other subjective judgments actually correspond to an objective standard. And I believe Catholicism has that standard. So, you know, I really identify with your passion for equality and upholding justice, and I invite you and other atheists to become Catholics, and therefore have an objective standard by which we can fight these inequalities together. Thank you.